All right, we have a book review of Lake Mine Sky, The Journey of a Progressive Rock Musician, a novel, part one by Regis Sprocket. The story of an English progressive rock musician and his career from the mid 1960s onwards. You're seeing a biographical amalgamation of various English musicians of that era. Somewhat cliche if you're already well versed in the genre, but nevertheless atmospheric and engaging. You can't say it's really Spinal Tap type material because there are too many philosophical, metaphysical digressions from the main narrative, which makes it more intellectually sophisticated and less predictable than many of the progressive rock biographies out there. Not saying that prog rock fans are low IQ, but a large number of them just want a simple, mainstream, accessible approach to the genre, be it in blogs, vlogs, journalism, literature, video, or in any other written or visual presentation of this musical realm. But Regis Sprocket, the writer, is going to invite you into this story from a different angle. This book offers an alternative perspective, more experimental and cerebral, almost poetic. You must necessarily be drawn into the complex wordiness, the essential loquaciousness, in order to arrive at a rather cinematic consciousness. It's actually a short novel, a novella. It's fiction. Nevertheless, there is also a straightforward musician's perspective on the process of practicing and creating the songs. The main character wakes up outdoors after a night out, and it's apparently an LSD fused adventure the night before, our conjecture. Excerpts from the first chapter. I woke up on a hillside in Dorset. Was it already afternoon? I don't recall what had brought me here, nor what had happened last night. I'd just taken the bus into town and was going to meet up with some friends at a pub. That's all I remember. A scent, a sound, a girl. Who was it? Was it Priscilla or Laura or maybe Anna? Or was it that strange one who was new to the neighborhood? She was the girl who hung out near the jukebox but didn't really talk to anyone while sipping a beer slowly, like it was just a social prop. And her eyes, they didn't see through you, they were you. And in her glance and in the stare there was no emotion, nothing that would induce romantic or sensual feelings. In this void, empty of normal sensation, a horizon arose, a blue reflection of earth or what seemed to be. You could say that she was the most beautiful young woman at the pub. Perfectly symmetrical facial features, a figure delicate and nymph-like. You can see how the band was evolving into prog rock early on in their developmental stage. From this excerpt from the second chapter, our band was called Cloud Ship, and we'd been around for a year now on the southern English club circuit. Surrey, Exeter, Portsmouth, Brighton, sometimes over to Cornwall and Wales. We played the typical covers bands played in 1966, but we're venturing into more experimental psychedelic songs and even into Renaissance music. As well, we'd often embellish our tunes with Baroque structures, going from counterpoint to jazz stylings, but not too much as we didn't want to overdo it. We'd give the audience a taste here and there to keep things interesting and vignette the melodies with unusual colors. Some descriptions of technical aspects are offered, an excerpt from a band rehearsal scene. Fortunately, when I advised Mike to adjust the bass line at a higher octave and Thomas to hold back a bit on the bass drums, they altered their contributions, and altogether the song became more interesting and complex. What sustained everything and kept the mood was the organ motif, which provided an urgent build-up to the chorus and hook. The writer presents insight into the lead singer's personal life as a description of a girl he was dating. She was a beautiful girl, the daughter of a Polish mother and an English father, limpid green eyes and reddish blonde hair, with a petite figure onto which almost any fashion looked adorable. Rather subdued in personality, you'd think she was aloof, but she was just hesitant and shy, really. Not a jolly, warm, typical English girl from these parts. She possibly had pretensions to be a great intellectual as she was studying classics and had ambitions to be a professor. Occasionally she'd puff a joint, but usually she was a slow drinker and she could hold her booze, though after too many she'd become rude and condescending. That was the flip side to her apparently sweet, mild personality. I didn't know if I'd ever marry her. In another chapter, the band gets invited to a party at a rich businessman's mansion. It is evocative of the swinging London scene of that era. We went upstairs, greeted by a semi-nude teeny bopper painted in shocking psychedelic colors and a fat dog barking incessantly. The other guests were laughing and careening into view, chatting up a storm, variously attired from tuxedos to gym clothing. The full gamut, as modern jazz whizzed and swirled between the legs, arms, and glasses of booze. Then we get into the psychology of the lead singer again. It was a foggy, misty morning, and on the bus to an adjacent town's music shop to check out some guitars got me pondering in that timeless zone where there's no future and no past, and the night holds no emotion. You're just there, in the moment, totally focused on what is, not a phantasm of before and after. An illusory world can be escaped through a mental portal. This is a time in the singer's life when nothing is certain and he must choose a future course of action, which may or may not necessarily remove the possibility of future stardom. The danger here is that he could go down the same road as Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, or others and end up another casualty of this 60s rock era. Just one small step and you might have another Syd Barrett. But the blessings of the universe hinge upon a necessity, which in this case I think is faith, a belief in his artistic vision, or in general, God, that prevents him from being distracted. We get a description of a dream or some type of LSD or shroom trip. A rabbit had hopped into the glade and bobbed up and down in a veil of mist. It eventually made its way over to me and stared with inquisitive eyes. I threw it the mushroom and it chomped down. For a moment I envisioned an audience member watching one of our gigs, and we'd play just anything and they'd bite into it. Then I saw a hall of mirrors appearing out of the mist from the dark columns of the trees. So this is part one of this series of books. In this part, the band does get an audition demo session at the London studio, famous London studio. So they are on the eve of success and on their way. So this is a Kindle book on Amazon, Lake, Mind, Sky, The Journey of a Progressive Rock Musician by Regis Sprocket. Hope you enjoy it.